Hello and welcome to the
Hello.
program. G'day, David. My name
Thanks,
is Luke
Luke.
Hunt, and this is another podcast for the Diplomat. And with me today is David Tan. David is the co-director of the Centre for Technology, Robotics, Artificial Intelligence and the Law. He's also the head for intellectual property of the E.W. Barker Centre for Law Business at the National University of Singapore. David, welcome to the program.
That's right. Thank you.
Look, we're living in a complicated world. AI, scamming, it's all converging, which, as I mentioned before we started recording, that it's, convergence. This isn't what we quite meant by that 20 years ago. But the law governments are having a hard time keeping up with advances in AI technology, and in particular with what's happening in terms of organised crime. But sensitive industries like finance in Asia are responding to AI-generated content commercially, legally, and there's a lot more going on than what we read in the newspapers and what we see online. Can you give us a brief outline? What are governments doing? How is the law changing to deal with this?
Yeah, sure. There's really a lot happening these days. There's so much on the internet and on social media. So I would probably summarize it in the 3 Ps because people remember these are snazzy
Right,
takeaways. So I'll say the first P is permanence, and the second is proliferation, and the third is
right,
perniciousness. So in terms of permanence, there's a lot of AI generated content. Some are beneficial because it's just makes workflow easier. Others are like deep fakes and synthetic media, and those are pernicious. But the first P about permanence is that they tend to have a digital memory because you could find them on Google. So even though you could have something taken down because it's copyright infringement or because it's
hmm
a deep fake, somehow you can still find it through Google or some of the search engines. So there's always some permanence, and countries and governments are struggling. How do you, for instance, trigger this right to forget that we get in Europe? In some
right,
countries, don't. So there's this permanence issues that governments are struggling with. The second one is how quickly it spreads. So it's a proliferation. I share with my aunt something that's AI generated, but I didn't know it's a fake. And she shares it the whole community, and it goes on and so forth. So it does spread very, very quickly. And especially with financial markets, public health issues, this proliferation is an issue for governments. How do you stop it very quickly?
right.
Yeah,
I
and the
imagine,
third one
yeah,
is really the harms, how much harm it creates for different individuals.
right. And then also goes to the issues of what constitutes publication, defamation laws,
Yeah.
which actually what I was looking at next was kind of with Singapore's legal system.
Mm.
How does the tradition of common law, uh, is it adapting, or is it being strained? But to keep pace with AI generated in terms of jurisdiction and rewriting statutes from scratch. And I mean, we're seeing all sorts of issues when it comes to jurisdiction, like people who have been sued for defamation in one country,
Yeah.
arrested in another. I'm old school, and what constitutes publication is the person who takes what's said and then
Yeah.
spreads that around.
Mm.
We're seeing laws abused and misused by certain countries around the region. We've no need to name them, but Singapore is at the forefront, I think, of trying to get it right. So, yeah, I mean, common law versus
Yeah.
legislation,
Yeah.
where is it going?
Yeah, I think we do need both common law and legislation. And Singapore
Right.
is blessed in the sense that it's a small country with just barely 6 million people. And we don't really have the politics of some of the larger countries, especially in a federal system, say
Mm,
Australia or the US, where you have the upper house and the lower house, and the bill needs to get through both houses.
right.
And in Singapore, uh, although the common law is trying to catch up in areas of defamation and privacy, the legislation has been fantastic. So just last year we have the online safety legislation. It's quite a
Hmm.
mouthful, the full name. I just call it the online safety.
That would be
Uh,
easier. Yeah.
yeah. And then we also have the POFMA, which is the Fake News Act in short.
Right.
So more importantly, I think to speak to your point earlier about the online safety, it creates civil cause of action. So, for instance, there are 5 causes of action that one can bring for civil remedies. So, if my intimate image, say a fake of me nude, had been shared, I could use the legislation to get to the Online Safety Commission to have it taken down. So that's a
Right.
statutory remedy, which is what we need very quickly to have the thing taken down. And then if I could locate the person who had posted it, I then have a statutory cause of action to sue for damages, for compensation.
Right.
So that has come into effect. And I think this is a sort of law that is needed in any country. But it's whether politically you could get it passed, through parliament.
Right. Just as a side question, how approachable are these big tech giants? I mean, they're notorious for not responding. They're notorious for, you can't knock on their door, you can't send them an email.
Mm.
People's, their social media accounts get closed for no
Yep.
reason.
Yep.
And they pay money for, little blue ticks by their name, all this sort of thing. Um, how convivial is the relationship between government and these big tech companies? And you're in Singapore, there's a lot of them
Mm.
based there. So one
Yeah.
would assume there is some sort of chit chat going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. I'm not sure the extent to which as between governments and big tech companies like Google and
Right.
Meta. Uh, but I think when you have a legislation in place in Singapore, like the Online Safety Commission,
Mm-hmm.
the commissioner has direct access to these large tech companies because they could issue takedown orders or correction orders,
Right.
which is very different from a private individual like me. So if I send an email or message to
Yeah.
Instagram, I'm not going to get a response for
No, you're
months.
going to you're going to get an AI bot that says, "Can I
Yeah.
help you?" And you're
Yeah,
not.
yeah, but I think with the legislative power, but behind these online safety commissions, you are going to get a response.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how they contact the company, but it's definitely not through the chatbots.
Well, one does get the impression that governments aren't kind of being as bullied as much, and they're more on the front foot when it comes to dealing with big tech companies and their attitudes to what constitutes publication, defamation, bullying of teenagers, all these kind of notorious unwanted byproducts of the digital age.
Yeah, I do see the tech companies wanting to come to the table because
Right.
even though they make, say, huge profits, yeah, there's the governance and liability issues that they need to tackle as well, because otherwise they could be shut up from certain markets, like Australia, for instance.
Yeah.
With social media accounts, you have to be of certain age, otherwise you cannot access. Or in terms of the copyrighted materials for training of
Yeah.
AI, again in Australia, is leading the charge here that you do have
Yeah.
to pay a fee, to
Right.
writers and photographers. Yeah, so they do have to play ball if they want to make money. They can't just say, piss off.
Okay. Well, I mean, that leads us into the next question, which is about freedom of expression, data protection. You've got a background in that, but also AI generated deep fakes and disinformation regionally. And disinformation is a term I kind of loathe to, as a journalist, we've seen this complicated by governments who dismiss facts as fake news with what constitutes publication and defamation. But AI and deep fakes, digress just slightly, but we're seeing more of that coming out of the out of organised crime and the scam industries, and it's I think it's quite disconcerting. But a government's doing enough. I mean, a lot of people would argue not, but I'm also okay. AI scams, where are they going next? What's up there?
Yeah, so with AI scams, it depends what kind of scam
Right.
it is, right? So if it's targeted at an individual, in Singapore, this Chinese drama, Pursuit of Jade, is a big hit. So with the lead actor Zhang Linghe, uh, specifically on TikTok, there are these fake ads targeted at Singaporeans.
Right.
As these are scams where the individual loses money. And I think the law has to treat that differently from a larger financial scam. So, for instance, there are those of the Prime Minister of Singapore endorsing certain companies, and that
Yeah.
could cause stock prices to move in a certain way, and that has impact on financial
This
market.
that's a major issue. As an old finance journalist, I remember the days when we'd go to the statistics office and we would get the statistics and compete against other journalists to get the numbers out. And now it's all about who controls those numbers. And we're seeing even with Donald Trump buying access to information and what can move markets and who can trade on it. It's becoming, I think, it's a big concern for the financial industry and how things are being done.
Yeah, and I think this is the kind of issues where roundtables and conferences are
Yeah,
important to bring the tech companies, the legislators, and academics like me in, because we all have different points of view. So the Tech Law Fest in Singapore and my own center, we're organizing an AI governance and liability conference in December. We got Google, to come on board as well, to
right.
be a presenting sponsor. So they are willing, large tech companies are willing to talk about how they could have these guardrails in place, when freedom of expression trumps
Right,
whatever it is doing. So I think people are trying their best to address all these issues.
right. Okay, we'll come back to that because I, when you look at what you're saying is well and good. We'll come back to that because I want to ask you about countries like Myanmar, which are effectively a failed state. But we'll get there in a minute. But in terms of IP or AI law, um, how are the courts reacting? And in terms of being forced to resolve or address rulings over the next 2 years, and when we're talking about the region, we've got communist states, one-party states, autocratic states, democratic states. We've got states where religion seems to have a big say in how things are going. So it's a bit of a tricky question in that sense. But how is it panning out?
Yeah, with AI and copyright, I think economics plays a greater part than
Right.
politics, because ultimately copyright and economic right, it grants the creators, authors, life plus 70. So
Hmm.
I think the issue today in terms of AI and copyright is, do you get authorship over what you create, chat GPT or
Right.
chat, and courts are applying the traditional rules, I think, quite effectively to say you do need that causal connection to what you ultimately get in the output. So if your prompts are too simple, you may
Uh,
get an output, but then there's no copyright over that. It's just free for everyone to use, including
that,
yourself.
right. I'm just wondering though, because I think we've all seen the issues of AI companies buying up, for example, rare books.
Mm.
Now, perhaps on a lot of those books, copyright has run out, but if it
Yeah.
hasn't run out and they're incorporating those books and what the author wrote into their AI systems, how do you redress that? How do you challenge your material, what you've created? Where do you go? To a local court? Can you do in Singapore? Can I hire a lawyer, which would be expensive? But how does one challenge this? How does one get
Yeah,
redress?
I think one has to. It is difficult. There's definitely a possibility of you going to court to sue to say that
Mm.
my book or my painting has been used. because the only way you could detect that is when there's an output, right? You're never going to know that someone had taken your book, say John
Right.
Grisham, and he has sued until you put in certain prompts and then you get identical lines from his novel. So when you do that, all you can prove is that that one book has been scanned and not like my entire collection of books or library. So that is exactly what some of the image libraries are
Right.
facing, right? That they say they cannot say my 5 million images in my image bank had been used. All they can prove is this one image had been used.
Interesting. A lot of photographers are going to find that one really
Yeah.
interesting. And as the copyright laws have changed over the last 20 years, I think it used to be copyright expired after 50 years, but it's been
Mm.
extended. There have been, the big international wires like Reuters, AP, Agence France Presse have challenged and looked for extension on these sorts of things, which kind of, it's all, as with everything, it's good on one hand, but on the other, it's like,
Yeah.
But yeah, look, in terms of the next 12 to 18 months, I've got a top of mind risk that most people outside the tech industry are not are not tracking it. What I'm driving at is what are we missing? I mean, most of us are kind of reasonably tech savvy and like to think we're up to date. And then, I'm reading the latest reports naming and shaming the social media companies about which ones are being hijacked by scammers, which is the obvious subject. But I mean, yeah, what are we missing? What can you confuse us with for the next 12 to 18 months? But what do we have to look out for?
No, I think we have to look out for, going back to the start of our conversation, it's how you could have both the regulators come in,
Mm,
in terms of creating these statutory quick takedown remedies together
right,
with a civil cause of action. And then it really has to be focused on the kind of harm. So there's a lot of chatter about we got to regulate everything, but I don't think we do. We only need to regulate what's truly important. And to one of
right,
my keys, what's really pernicious that proliferates and has that permanent digital memory. So I'll say intimate sexual images, child abuse
sure,
images, whether
sure,
truthful or
absolutely,
not, that should be priority, right? And
yeah,
then all these
absolutely,
about AI generated, copyrighted content, should there be authorship? Should we compensate authors? I think that to me is lower down the priority, because if I am, say, John Grisham, because he's sued, so I'm using him as an
right.
example, he's not going to lose that much revenue if his book had been scanned. Because if you have something in the style of John Grisham that ChatGPT produces, it is not John Grisham. It doesn't substitute
I
for,
agree. I agree. I
yeah,
sometimes wonder if there are too many hissy fits by
yeah,
people who are sort of like, well, you got the kind of thing, but at the same time, can
yeah.
understand their concerns in terms of
So
lost revenue. We've
if
all
I
got to
could
make a living.
use, yeah, just one more example, Taylor
Sure.
Swift, right? Because she was in the news about the deep fakes, the pornographic deep fakes of Taylor
Right.
Swift. I said, yes, that needs to be addressed, top of the agenda. But songs in the style of Taylor Swift, not Taylor
Right.
Swift, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I've watched. I mean, many years ago, uh, there were a lot of journalists. I was part of that pack, and be complaining about being plagiarized, and you had to make. You kind of had to make up in your own mind. Am I going to worry about this? And
Mm.
the old line was copying is the highest form of flattery,
Yep.
and I think the issues are more industry wide and government control, and what you're saying about certainly child pornography and certainly
Mm.
pornographic images being used and applied to people, that sort of thing. It's kind of got it has to be dealt with harshly. And while I'm saying it's one thing for a country like Singapore or Australia to deal with these issues. But how do you deal with, this is what I was going to drive at before, how do you deal with countries like Myanmar? And it is the failed state. I know it's a tricky question, but it's like, I mean, no, I had a report the other day about 14,000 people who have been trafficked and are victims and working out of 2 clusters of compounds just west of Three Pagoda Passes on the Thai border. And no one seems to be able to stop it. And from a tech perspective, we must be able to see where these signals are being emitted from. We must be able to track where this is coming from. Can that be done? I mean, what do we do?
I think this is very different from the AI issues.
Yeah,
It's perhaps more political, and I think the citizens there might be able to access the internet to showcase images of violence or
right.
oppression. But at the same time, there could be deep fakes as well. So I struggle to think, what they can do, because you could have images of soldiers abusing the citizens, but at the same time, that could be generated as sort of deep fake to heighten
Right.
global attention.
It's an interesting suburb. I mean, I know of one bank, which I won't name, but they hired a team of high-tech whiz kids, and
Mm,
they set them up a desk, and their job was to scam the scammers. But in doing that, they blocked off access to the scammers
yeah,
from getting into the bank. And I
yeah.
thought it was very clever, but it sort of requires some imagination and kind of getting out there and having a crack by individual companies to deal with these issues, because I'm not sure it can be done at a government level.
Yeah, I always think back to the movie Wag the Dog. I don't know if you've
Yeah,
seen
it's a great movie.
that. Yeah, so it could be either way. Governments could construct this more positive image of what's happening within their regime, but at the same time, citizens could also construct a more negative perception
And
of
they
what.
are. I mean, I remember the crackdowns. I mean, it's Cambodia has an obsession with Facebook. A lot of people have gone to jail for very simple, innocuous posts, but it kind of, I remember when the crackdown started on social media, perhaps 10 years ago, 15 years ago,
Yeah,
and all they do, it's sort of like taking a mallet and mashing it, and they just splinter into WhatsApp, set up their own little channels, and have a chat, and then no one comes back and talks. I mean, technically, I think it's still it's still speaking publicly if it's more than 3 people. I think constitutes publication. But the point is that so it's gone to a point where they can't monitor it. And it's becoming a damn sight harder. But do you see more of that happening with uh, as AI increasingly becomes part of our lives? And also, I think the the attitude of people to social media. Do you see any great changes in the way people use Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn?
yeah.
Because I think there is, but I haven't. It's only anecdotal.
No, I teach entertainment law at the National
Oh,
University of.
right. Yep.
And since 2009, and I have to keep changing my syllabus because it used to be on movies and music, and
Yep.
the visual performing arts, not to put in so much of social media, because it really has transformed entertainment generally. And certainly more and more people are gravitating towards social media platforms, and even
Right.
these like messaging, like Telegram, which is harder to monitor than what's on Instagram or Facebook.
Right. A
And
lot.
once we
Yep.
go into these direct messaging platforms, then we do need more laws to regulate those.
Right. I'm curious about that. I mean, you mentioned university, or you were lecturing in at university. Many years ago, I wrote a course, a sideline course to what I was writing, but it was all about pop culture.
Oh yeah.
And, students love pop culture subjects. It's a bit of an
Yeah.
easy one.
Yeah.
But it was all about the big entertainment companies from
Yeah.
Sony to 20th Century Fox, how movies, radio, television, and it was only social media was just still making an impact. But I guess the social media now is it has to be the main driver of pop culture. But how do you monitor pop culture in that sense? And also, pop culture has always been difficult
Yeah,
to monitor
I'm
and be
glad you brought
current,
that
like you
up.
were saying.
Yeah, yeah. I do teach a course titled Intellectual Property and Popular Culture at
Right.
Melbourne. So I've been
Okay.
doing that in sort of the summer and winter intensive.
Yep.
We do talk about issues of privacy and social media and that's in the course. So for instance, if a celebrity comes out of a grocery store and then you take a picture of that and the grocery store posts that photograph,
Right.
is that a commercial use as unauthorized as that involve
Well, that's
personal?
tricky territory. As we all know, A-listers are notorious for wanting to be in those magazines.
Yeah.
And then they'll complain afterwards. Oh, they took my photo. It was Saturday morning. I wasn't
Yeah.
dressed appropriately and all this sort of nonsense. And it's all made up gobbledygook because the only reason they're doing it is to stay in the papers so that they can command more money
Yep.
when the next contract comes along.
Yeah, precisely. I don't, those are sort of constructed uh, performances in public.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, I don't really call it journalism, but I don't want to insult anybody. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I guess it's not quite. I was going to make this my final question, but we've got a little bit of time.
Yeah, sure.
Will it ever be possible to end scamming? I mean, a lot of the scams we're seeing these days are like an extension of 20 years ago, they'd call them boiler room operations. And
Yeah.
there were Westerners were notorious for running them. They'd go into countries like Cambodia, rent the entire floor of the building. And I was involved with police busts, and you'd go in there, and it was, there would be 35 Westerners with 35 phones all plugged into the wall. There'd be half-cut lunches, no chairs, no tables, no desks, not like today. And, they'd all be calling. But, I mean, obviously it was a lot less sophisticated and it wasn't, um, certainly not on the scale. But what they're doing is pretty much what's happening now, but on a industrialized scale that we just haven't seen before. So yeah,
Yeah.
can it be ended? Can we end
No,
scamming?
no. I
Right.
think it's just human nature to well first there are different kinds of scams. So one is sort of the get rich, invest in this scheme, and I think it's part of human nature to want to make more money. So
Greed.
greed. But then there's the other kind, which is I think more disturbing, where you get a direct email that says
Mm-hmm.
your bank needs you to update your password.
Right.
That's very legitimate, right? To me, it seems like yes, my bank
Yeah.
it is going on to a new platform.
They're getting better at it. I mean, I
Oh
received
yeah.
a scam the other day, and from actually it was Telstra, the Australian company, and they wanted me to access my account, and then I looked at it and I just think because the Telstra colours are blue and orange,
Uh-huh.
and I looked at it just, and then I looked at it again. Those colours aren't quite right. And then you look at the email address, and it's like xyz1234 at hotmail.com. Telstra's not going to send you an email through Hotmail.
Yeah.
But I can sort of imagine. I don't like. Sometimes I don't like talking about these things because I don't want to give anyone ideas. It's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Oh, we can fix that. But, as a final thought, where do you think we'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now in terms of
No,
dealing with scams?
I think I probably have to give a shout out to the Tech Law Fest because I'm on a
Yeah,
panel where we
right,
talk about synthetic media, right? All these fakes.
right.
We have industry people and the regulators discussing that. So
Yep.
definitely come and listen to us. Personally, I think that one just has to be more vigilant as to the kind of fakes we get
Right.
and how we respond to that. So phone calls can be difficult as the regulators focus on these online scams. The traditional methods are coming back in. I've been getting phone calls to say, "Hey, I'm so and so," or "Do you remember me?"
Yeah.
and they address me by
Yeah.
name.
No,
So,
I
so,
had one
so
this morning
yeah, so there's
from
some
Amy.
latent
If
leak
you're watching, if
somewhere.
you're listening, Amy, no, I don't remember you.
Yeah, yeah. So but my mom's gonna fall for that. My 89-year-old mom is
Well,
gonna think, "Oh,
and that's where it's hard. I guess this is a subject for another podcast, but that's where it's harsh. You've got
mm,
elderly people, their life savings. They
mm,
just think they're doing the right thing,
yep,
and you've got these. I was going to say a nasty word, but you have these thieves, and it's
yes,
just theft. It's
yep,
morally, legally, it's all wrong, and they
mm,
are targeting these people. And it's like I still think there has to be a better way in terms of. I don't know about downloading another program. There's an alert set out the other day from I think it was the Cambodian government, basically saying don't download these apps which are designed to protect you from scammers because they've
yeah,
been produced by the scammers. And, I know scammers in Cambodia were also
mm,
tracking people who had been scammed and then offering to get their money back. So, you lost 20,000, give us 2,000, we'll get your money back. And they take the 2,000 and they're gone.
yeah, yeah." I I think it is. Dare I say a losing battle? It seems to be a losing battle because scammers would find ways to go back to the
Right,
traditional methods. If you try to regulate these online deep fakes, there are
right.
different ways
But
to get at
I think,
people.
right. And I think what you're saying is quite interesting. I mean, dealing with Hong Kong banks recently, and I thought they were very good. And they're going back to pen and paper.
Mm,
Sign in, check your signature. And I think that's the only way of doing things is to keep your money locked up. And you can only get to it after going through a step-by-step process that probably involves a phone call and talking to someone.
yeah. Or back to the 1970s thumbprint on documents.
I'm up for that. David, on that note, look, thanks very much. It's a
My
wonderful
pleasure.
chat. I hope we can do another podcast in future. Perhaps we can focus a bit more on pop culture. It's a lot of fun.
Definitely. Love it. Great chatting with you, Luke.
Thanks, David. Cheers, mate.